Alright guys, so we've got a fun video for you today with our 1965 Ford F100. We are here at German Auto, which is kind of confusing, but our buddy Toby runs this shop. He's hugely passionate about everything automotive and he loves these old trucks. He's agreed to take on some work with the 65 F100. We're going to inspect it and see how bad it is. Spoiler alert, it's pretty bad. Let's get right into it.
As soon as I popped the hood on this old gem, first thing I seen is a pretty decent sized oil leak coming down the engine. You know, I believe it's the valve cover gasket here on top, so it's cheap fix, not the end of the world, but it should be fixed, you know, because it's pretty bad. So that'd be the first thing I'd recommend. After that, you move on to this radiator hose. It's a little cobbled on there. It's bent and a little bit too far of a bend for my likings to flow the proper amount of coolant. So I would definitely get a proper radiator molded hose that's bent properly for that. One of the other big issues I'm seeing is it's going to need a carburetor to come off and get rebuilt. The whole bolts actually have came loose on the lower portion of the carburetor and caused it to be loose, and it could be a vacuum leak, and it also could leak fuel externally if it gets bad enough.
The crazy thing is though, like, it doesn't run horribly for the quality of the vacuum.
It starts and runs great, and you choke it a little bit when it's cold and it fires right up, and it actually does. I give the motor that. It does start and run every time and sound pretty decent. So most of the other stuff's down low, so we'll just get it up and check that and go from there. So the next big thing on this thing would have been on here in the back end. I noticed this bumper was actually off of a different vehicle, and they had made brackets to bolt it up to the frame, so that's not factory at all. And if you look at the pull hitch for the receiver, actually is bolted to the same metal big piece of bar. It's actually loose. The bolts are all loose, and the spacers they used, so it's actually not really doing much. I would definitely recommend not towing anything with this thing until that's fixed, personally. After that, I move on. The exhaust is basically seen better days. It's very rusted out and needs to be, you know, some of the hangers need to be replaced as well on it before there's catastrophic issues there. From there, basically, the other issues we seen was the diff services. The fluids basically had more water than they did 80-90 fluid in them. So we had to take the covers off, clean them all up, and do the services to them. Issue with that is the gears internally had some teeth missing off of them. The ring and the pinion were missing chunks. Front and rear differential were the same way. So that was one of the issues. We already tackled just the fluid change on them just to freshen them up a little bit and give them a little more health. From there, we've been working on the e-brake cables. You can see I got two of the cables strung, the rear cables, and we had to take off the drums with the axle shafts to do that. And when we were in this left rear side, we did find that there was gear oil in the drum, which means the seal was leaking differential fluid through the tube into the brakes, which means the brakes do not work very well with diff fluid on them. So we got that taken care of. Now we're just waiting on one piece, actually, the lock ring for the lock nuts on the wheel bearing. So we have that ordered. That should come in soon so we can get that finished up and we'll be on to the next stuff. Transfer case, only thing we got here is we do have a little seep, and it's pretty small seep at this point, but it's coming out of the output seal, they call it, for the front drive shaft here that goes to the front diff. It's a really small seep. It's not even dripping, you can see, but it is moist and wet. So we're going to keep an eye on that and just verify that it doesn't get worse at this time. And then same with the transmission. We did a service to it. The fluid was very dirty as well on it. It had water moisture inside of it, and it was really built up and kind of wet too. So that's going to have to be cleaned up a little bit and then rechecked down the road after it's, you know, got a few miles on it.
Hey, what about the battery, Toby? You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So right here, someone basically from the factory, they have these batteries hidden underneath the passenger's footwell. So you have to take the cover off to access them. It did not have a hold down, so we just temporarily put the ghetto rig bungee on there, which, you know, I don't really recommend. We'll have to make a nice bracket to hold it. But also, it's not fully enclosed. The box is not. So someone actually put this, you know, big old heat shield wrap on there to keep some of the dirt out. And basically, I'd recommend, you know, actually trying to enclose the box most of the way. That way it's keeping all the dirt and dust and mud out of it from down here, just the location of it. But we did put a brand new interstate battery in there, and that was, you know, the extent of that issue.
I do see the floors seem pretty solid though, Toby.
Oh yeah, if you look overall up here on the body and then the rockers and stuff, rust-wise, the chassis and the cab is actually really decent. You know, if you look in the fender wells up in there, overall, someone's done, you can tell, a little painting with the black paint and stuff to freshen it up, but there's no big holes, no major repairs to be done, you know, body-wise on this thing. So that's the main stuff's on the bed, on the body.
Yeah, which is the easier part.
Exactly, a lot easier. And then basically from there, move on to the front here. We've definitely seen the shackles for the front leaf springs were way too long. You know, you're talking, you got 3 extra inches on them. So these are hanging down, you're driving and you've got no clearance and you hit them on rocks and stumps and, you know, raccoons when you're not paying attention. So I'd recommend getting new ones of these because a few of them are actually bent. So we're going to have to get some new U-bolts eventually, get them, you know, the right length and cut them down shorter if we have to so they're not sticking down. A few small oil leaks on the thing, but that's basically the valve cover we showed you before and a small little oil leak out of the back of the motor. The other big funny thing we seen here was the front axle here has a bump stop on top of the leaf spring shackle. And if you kind of go right above it where it came down, you can see the actual frame is, I mean, it took a hit. And that frame is thick. It's hard to bend a frame like that. And you can just kind of look at the other side. You can see how flat and nice it is. It's perfectly flat. So you can see where that one actually has made a mark and touched it before. In my opinion, someone's took this thing out and they hit a big ditch a little too fast and bottomed the front end out on the frame and bent it a little bit.
That's funny. So you can really tell underneath that the axles are not original to the truck. I mean, they're 1-ton axles.
Oh yeah, you can tell because the axles are so big. They're 8-lug axles, number one, and they're so big and heavy duty. You know, basically from the factory, they had pretty small actual axles on the 4x4s on these things.
What about like how do those front knuckles work? Those are pretty crazy.
Yeah, basically it's the same design as a G-Wagon or a Toyota. It's basically, you know, what they call, instead of IFS suspension, it's a solid axle. Yep. They call it. So it's a big knuckle and it pivots on that knuckle. So it's another thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to clean up the knuckles really good. We're going to have to get in here and make sure there's grease inside of them because there's got to be grease inside of them to keep them greased. Yep. Because there is axle fluid in the tube, but the axle fluid does not go into the ball. It's not supposed to unless you have issues with the seals. Right. So that would be one thing to tackle down the road as well. That wheel bearing on this side, when we got it in, was definitely super loose and dangerous, and the wheel had 3 inches of play.
Gotcha.
So we did tighten that up, repack it with grease and all that, and get the wheel, you know. Now when you wiggle it, you got no play in it side to side, and it spins nice and freely and smoothly.
So this is our old heater core. It looks like an artifact that came out of the Titanic. I mean, it's crazy, and it was just gushing coolant. And I found one, but it turns out it was slightly wrong. But Toby was able to fix it, right? More or less.
Yeah, well, the issue is I did a lot of research as well, and you can find them that are the same size core, they call it, so it fits in the box. This actually goes into a big heater box, which the air blows through. So when you bolt the box up into the car, these come through what they call the firewall, or the chassis, into the engine bay. The one you found had too short, so they're about this short, which were just enough actually to get a rubber hose on with a clamp, luckily. Interesting. After I put it in the box. So what I had to do is just take the original hoses off, heater hoses off, and run them through the firewall, which usually you wouldn't do. Put them in here, connect them with the hose clamps on the inside next to the heater box. Gotcha. So I did make it work. I had to, you know, seal up the holes a little bit, you know, and which is normal. But it does blow hot again and doesn't steam up the windshield, which is a big positive in my book. Yep, win-win.
Yeah, I like that shot.
We'll use that. Now we've got a new set of wheels and tires because how do you make an old truck with so many issues better? Well, you just put good looking wheels and tires on it, and then you'll want to take care of it and fix those things that are wrong. So we've got some cool American racing wheels, which you might have seen in the last video, and these BFG KM3s. This is gonna make a big difference. I'm excited to see them go on.
All right, so check it out. Here are the BFG KM3s, the 35 by 12.5 R17s mounted on the wheels that we chose. These are, I think, American racing wheels. We bought them and had them mounted up, and I think they look really cool, but just praying they fit on the truck because that'd be a real bummer to try to return 4 of them. So these wheels are pretty cool, although Toby hates them. But we couldn't use them because they're 16.5 inches in diameter, and yet, well, you can get tires for 16.5s, but they're like 400, 500, some cases $800 a tire, which is insane. It's just, they just don't make them anymore. So we went with 17s instead. It's much more gettable. So these are gonna have to go. But yeah, these are the, Toby, right? These are the BFG KOs. These are the original all-terrain. That's nuts. All right, Toby, what's your technique?
Basically, you got to use your knee here. That way you're not doing a direct lift and hurting your back all the time. And then a nice rim, you got to be careful where you grab because you don't want to mess the rim up. So in this one, I'm going to go right on the inside by the hub. And basically, I give it a little spin, kick it up like that, roll it up the hip, you're good to go.
That's badass. But it looks really, really good. Toby, thank you for your help, dude. This came out killer.
Got the right hardware to bolt them up. That's half the battle.
So I gotta ask, is it, being the age of this truck, right, is it better, worse, or kind of as you expected when you like first got it on the lift and started pulling stuff apart?
I would say it's to be expected with the age of it.
Yeah.
You know, and that it sat around a lot and hasn't been necessarily driven on the daily in a while.
Right.
But, you know, any vehicle you get of this age is going to need about the same kind of mechanical.
It's probably like, if you wanted to put enough money into it though, it's probably savable, right? I mean, as a platform.
Oh, the body is definitely savable. It looks like it's a little rough, but I've seen a lot worse in my day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, there you have it. Big thank you to Toby here at German Auto for doing the inspection. Big thank you for him for continuing the work on this. He's just about to wrap up the parking brake, and then we'll have more fun off-road vids. See if we can add another dent to the other side and the other frame. As always, it's Tommy, Toby, and Case. See you next time.